I do want to talk about those DOGE cuts and how much they matter in Virginia, because a lot of the people who reside in Northern Virginia, they're federal workers. And when Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl-Sears was asked about if she embraced DOGE cuts, she said, we don't want anyone to lose their jobs. She empathized with people who did lose their jobs, but she said Virginia has over 250,000 jobs open. What was the response, do you think, in Virginia to that type of answer? I mean, what do Virginians want to hear?
Well, she also said, which has been effectively already used as an ad, hey, everybody loses their jobs. And the jobs that are available in Virginia do not match the job skills of those who are losing their jobs. And so first, it's not just that they're losing federal employee jobs, they're losing federal contractor jobs. Veterans are losing their jobs. So, for example, if you're a veteran, a third of those jobs are veterans. So if you're a veteran who's losing your job at the VA, there's not necessarily a replacement job in Virginia for that. If you're somebody, say, who's a specialist in national security, there's not a replacement for that. If you're a researcher at NIH living in Virginia, there's not necessarily a replacement for that job. Virginia has a lot of the jobs that they had on their website were things like at nursing homes, retail jobs. That's if you're a GS-15 at the NSA, you're not going to go work at a nursing home or work at Tyson's Corner. So the replacement jobs have not matched in any way comparable. So that was seen as a pretty flippant response. And the mismatch, Virginia does have one of the highest unemployment rates and job loss rates in the country because of DOGE. And the DOGE cuts have been they weren't surgical, they were a bulldozer. So to not have our people standing up for us. Listen, when I was in there as a staffer, when I worked for Frank Wolf, people like George Allen, previous Republicans would stand up regardless of party when the president came in and went after our government employees. That is different now because these Republicans are afraid to say anything against Donald Trump. People notice that. Your first obligation as a representative is to represent your people, not Donald Trump. That's been the message that Abigail has said. Because listen, Abigail has said, listen, I stood up against my party. I voted against Nancy Pelosi. I was the most bipartisan member in my delegation, in my caucus. I stood up when it mattered. Winsome Sears and these guys aren't doing that. That's something that resonates. I found when I ran, because I was willing to stand up against my party, people appreciate that because that makes a difference for their jobs. It's also about national security and about the importance of the work that these people are doing. And you're recognizing that their work is important, whether it's curing cancer at NIH, which, Republicans, Newt Gingrich was leading the charge on that. Now that's been decimated. So people say, whoa, wait a minute. You Republicans were telling us you wanted to do that. Why are we decimating that office? And as somebody who voted for all those increases in the first Trump administration, I'm saying, yes, that is insane. And that nobody from our attorney general to Winsome Sears is saying, hey, you can't do that. That was voted into law. You can't cut those grants without Congress doing something, and nobody's standing up for that anymore. So that's the kind of thing that I do think resonates here in Virginia, and people realize this is a really different time, and I think that's having an impact.
To that point, is this a